We asked 1,000 doctors if stranded in the wilderness, which would they want? Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, Advil, or Bayer? More doctors chose Bayer, nearly 2 to 1 over extra strength Tylenol. Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
Piedmont Airlines presents a phone number so valuable, you'll never forgive yourself if you don't write it down.
The pen.
This is the number that'll get you airfares so low, you'll find them hard to believe.
It's got to be a pen, right? Hang on, we'll look.
And you'll also get Piedmont service that's been rated among the best in the industry. So call Piedmont today.
I got it.
What could be simpler?
Judge Jackson, you've got dirty dentures.
Objection. I just soak them.
Soaking's not enough. That's why your dentures are dirtier than they should be. Brushing with Denture Cream cleans denture film much better. Look, when tested against Efferdent, Denture Cream denture toothpaste gets dentures much cleaner.
Nearly twice as clean.
So don't get caught with dirty dentures. Brush them clean with minty-tasting Denture Cream or mouthwash fresh Denture Gel.
Case closed.
Tums doesn't have it. Rolaids doesn't have it. Malox Plus does. We have what you need for complete relief of excess acid, heartburn, and gas. Malox for acid and heartburn, plus simethicone for gas. Get complete relief. Try Malox Plus.
If you think that President Reagan's new budget has a lot of numbers, consider this distance, 71 billion trillion miles from Earth. That's where astronomers believe that they have now discovered the birth of a giant galaxy. They say that they have detected evidence that perhaps 1 billion suns ignited into a huge cloud to form this galaxy. That discovery, of course, once again raises the possibility of life in some form somewhere else in the universe. And while that possibility exists out there, here on Earth, many other forms of life are dying out, never to return. Generally, we're unaware when a species dies out. It just happens. But as NBC science correspondent Robert Bazell reports tonight, now it is happening with such frequency, it is hard to be unaware.
The proboscis monkey, the water monitor, the snow leopard. These are all endangered species. This creature might not appear as interesting as the others, but it is not just endangered. This is the last dusky seaside sparrow.
It's the end of part of the creation. Every species is something very special. It's taken millions of years in many cases to create.
The last dusky is in this cage in a closed-off area of Discovery Island, a zoo at Walt Disney World. Curator Charlie Cook keeps a close watch.
He's still healthy, but becoming a little geriatric, and so he's probably seeing his final days on Earth.
At one time in the nearby marshes of Central Florida, there were thousands of the birds, but mosquito control programs killed a lot of them, and development covered much of the marshland. A few years ago, Florida Audubon Society members captured all the birds they could find in the wild, with the hope of breeding them in captivity. But they found only 5, and they were all males. They were able to breed the males with females of a related species, but this is the only surviving dusky. Species extinction is nothing new. 99% of the species that ever lived on Earth are now extinct. But for 3 billion years, species died off and new ones appeared at a constant rate until this century.
What we're doing right now is getting rid of as many as 1/2 of the species on Earth within our lifetime. That's an enormous difference in time scale.
Many biologists believe that we are killing off so much life that ultimately we may threaten our own survival. They say we should be concerned about the loss of any species, including a plain-looking sparrow. Robert Bazell, NBC News, Lake Buena Vista, Florida.
That's nightly news for this Monday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. My thanks to Garrett Utley for filling in here while I was away. I'll see you again tonight and then tomorrow night.
Popular demand, Remington's back in a 2-hour action movie. And if you thought their wedding was wild, wait till you see the honeymoon tonight.
The Scandal.
talk about things Toledo has done. Don't speak about we've done this. You speak about what Toledo can, will, and must do.
The White House releases key documents in the Iran-Contra affair, and there is fresh information tonight on the deep involvement of the CIA with the Contras.
NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The White House, Congress, the CIA, they were all reacting today to the startling material reported on this program last night from the Senate Intelligence Committee report on the Iran-Contra affair. And tonight we have more information from that report, which still has not been released. Today, the White House released key documents which demonstrated that trading arms for hostages was a top priority of the Iranian initiative. NBC White House correspondent Andrea Mitchell and congressional correspondent John Dancy tonight with the latest. We begin with Andrea.
Tom, because of the NBC report, the White House today released top secret documents that are also part of the Senate Intelligence Committee's report. The White House hoped that these documents would show that the arms for hostages deal was only part of a larger diplomatic initiative to Iran. The administration released the secret order that President Reagan signed to permit the arms sales and this 3-page supporting memo, both dated last January 17th. Written by Oliver North for his boss, then National Security Advisor John Poindexter, the memo does call the release of hostages a byproduct of a larger effort to develop ties to potentially moderate forces in Iran. But it also establishes a direct link between weapons and hostages, saying, if all the hostages are not released after the first shipment of 1,000 weapons, further transfers would cease. And it says this approach through the government of Iran may well be our only way to achieve the release of the Americans held in Beirut. The president, photographed today at work on his State of the Union speech, has repeatedly denied that he approved an arms for hostages swap.
We did not, repeat, did not trade weapons or anything else for hostages, nor will we.
The Senate Republican leader believes it did turn into an arms for hostages trade. In his view, a mistake.
I asked Admiral Poindexter, were you doing this to get the hostages released, or was this to improve our relationship with moderate elements in Iran? I didn't get a satisfactory answer.
The White House says the president was briefed on the Poindexter memo last January before leaving for a medical checkup. But senior officials say that Mr. Reagan did not read the memo, because Poindexter wrote a note at the bottom of his memo saying, President was briefed verbally from this paper. VP Don Regan and Don Fortier, an NSC deputy who has since died, were present. But a senior official told NBC News White House investigators don't know whether Poindexter wrote that note then or much later, possibly to make it appear that the president was really unaware of the arms for hostages connection. White House officials say they want all the facts revealed, but they are still refusing to release other documents, including conflicting White House accounts written by Oliver North. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, at the White House.
After the first shipment of 1,000...
The new chairman and vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee were upset about the leak of the draft report to NBC News.
What is now out in the media is only fragmentary, it is only partial. In my view, it is not even a full summary of the evidence presented to our committee.
Vice Chairman William Cohen said the early draft contained inaccuracies, but declined to be specific. Cohen agreed, however, that the report shows the Iran deal as an arms for hostages arrangement.
What started out as a conceptual effort to establish lines of communication with whatever factions existed in Iran, very soon evolved into an exchange of arms for hostages.
Other Republicans, like former committee chairman David Durenberger, said the Intelligence Committee should now swiftly release the full report. Durenberger said that would show the president had a larger design than just the hostages.
You can say that the president was interested in the hostages. You couldn't say differently. But this whole deal would not have taken place if Ronald Reagan wasn't looking for a post-Khomeini opening to Iran.
Among those calling for quick release of the report, Senate Republican leader Bob Dole.
The report is out, I guess. I don't know how much of it's out, but if it's not all out, there ought to be quick action to release the balance of it.
But the vice chairman of the Intelligence Committee refused.
We shouldn't be either stampeded by the White House or by the press into publishing a document which we feel is inadequate at this point to truly reflect what the factual situation is.
The Intelligence Committee expects to complete a final version of its report in about 2 weeks. It may or may not be released to the public. Tom?
Thanks, John. Among other things, the Senate Intelligence Committee report says that CIA Director William Casey was tipped last October that money from the Iran affair was being diverted to the Contras. Today, the CIA issued a statement saying that Casey, now hospitalized with a brain condition, had no direct knowledge of the Contra diversion. It was only tenuous speculation, and he passed that along to the National Security Council. While the extent of the CIA knowledge of the diversion of money to the Contras is not known tonight, NBC's James Polk can report now that there does appear to be a link, however, between Casey and the CIA and military supplies for the Contras.
According to the Senate Intelligence Report, CIA Director William Casey met at least twice with the former Pentagon general who ran the secret operation to resupply the Contras in Nicaragua.
Beyond that, a source involved in the investigation has told NBC News the airlift to the Contras was run with the full knowledge, support, and approval of the CIA.
The military resupply operation came at a time last summer when Congress had forbidden any government aid for that purpose. This is the man who ran the airlift, retired Air Force Major General Richard Secord. Our source says Secord kept Casey fully informed, meeting with him frequently at CIA headquarters, sometimes as often as 3 times a week. The Senate report quotes CIA records as showing Secord did visit Casey's office at least twice in the past year. It does not say what was discussed. Our source said the weapons for the Contras were purchased in Portugal by a retired CIA official, Thomas Kleins. Secord ran a private business, and his company managed the secret arms flights from this airbase in El Salvador to the Contras inside Nicaragua. The source says it was the CIA which told the flight crews where to drop the weapons, where the Contras were, what flight routes to take, how to avoid the Sandinistas. That information, we are told, came from CIA station chiefs in Honduras and El Salvador. The CIA had no comment on this tonight. It is still unclear who paid for the Contra resupply operation and how much. But the Senate report says $10.5 million is missing from the Swiss bank accounts used to finance 2 of the Iran arms deals. And the report quotes then White House security aide Oliver North as acknowledging that perhaps what he called some residuals from those Iran deals were used for the Contras. James Polk, NBC News, Washington.
When asked today about the Senate Intelligence Committee report, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North said, "I feel good about anything that will bring about a rapid conclusion to this thing." However, the Senate report indicates that North altered 3 memos so they would more closely match what the president was saying about the Iran initiative. What is not clear is whether he was acting on his own or under orders. And tonight it appears that North's boss, National Security Advisor John Poindexter, gave the president some bad advice. In the memo telling Mr. Reagan that he could keep the Iran arms sales secret from Congress, Poindexter said a 1981 opinion by Attorney General William French Smith made it possible to sidestep this reporting agreement. But when asked about this by NBC's Carl Stern, Smith said today that his opinion was in a completely different context and was not intended to get around the congressional reporting requirements. We'll have more on the Israeli connection and more news in just a moment here on NBC.
Even without this box, I'd know this is a delicious sunsweet prune. Am I psychic? Observant. This pitted prune is clearly rounder and plumper. That makes it a sunsweet prune. It also makes it delicious.
Say, these must be Jack's new Canon personal copiers. Great colors.
Yeah, and they copy in 5. You want to see?
Go ahead, make my day.
Everything you need to copy with is in this replaceable cartridge.
I'll do that.
Good thing Canon has PCs for every personality, even pushy agents.
Lighten up, Jack.
These new Canon personal copiers are light. Put one in my car.
What a guy.
Personal copiers for every personality. For information, call toll-free 1-800-OK-CANON.
Sarah Lewington suffers from frequent sinus headaches.
A lot of pressure right here and a lot of pain all around the eyes.
To relieve the pain and pressure of her sinus headache, Sarah Lewington took a maximum strength pain reliever with a maximum strength pressure reliever. Tylenol sinus medication.
My sinus headache is gone. No more pain and no more pressure. I feel like a different lady. I feel like $1,000,000.
Tylenol sinus medication for maximum sinus headache relief.
Do you know someone that got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning? Send them an FTD pick-me-up bouquet.
its bright flowers, rainbow coffee mug, and reusable tote bag will put them back in the swing of things.
One of the principal puzzles in this affair is the Israeli role. The White House says that Israel initiated the arms deal. Israel says not true. NBC's Fred Francis has more on all of this.
According to testimony given to the Senate committee last month, the Iran initiative was born in Jerusalem and revived by Israeli leaders every time it began to falter. The report says Michael Ledeen, a Mideast expert assisting the National Security Council, returned from Israel in the spring of 1985 with a plan to approach Tehran through an Iranian middleman known to Israeli arms dealers. Former National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane tentatively blessed the plan that would eventually swap weapons for hostages. He wrote to Secretary of State Shultz that Israel is not noted for dealing with fools and charlatans. Shultz agreed to explore the Israeli opening, but cautioned Israel's interest and ours are not necessarily the same. There is no evidence that Shultz's warning was ever heeded. The Iranian middleman was Manucher Ghorbanifar, a man distrusted for years by the CIA. According to the Senate report, Israel and Ghorbanifar led the United States deeper and deeper into the Iranian thicket because, the report concludes, it was in Israel's interest that the Iraq-Iran war continue. The Senate report says that Israel has been secretly selling arms to Iran since 1980 for a war which is good for Israel's security and its arms industry. But in December of 1985, after 6 frustrating months, McFarlane told the president it was time to end the initiative. But the report concludes the Israelis wouldn't take no for an answer. In January, Prime Minister Peres sent a member of his government, Amiram Nir, to Washington to revive the arms for hostages scheme. It worked. Lieutenant Colonel North later told Attorney General Meese that it was at that January meeting that the Israeli Nir suggested skimming profits to pay for the war in Nicaragua. Today, Peres denied that Israel pressured the White House. In fact, the Israelis have said it was the other way around.
We were asked to do an act of friendship. We did it willingly, and I think we did it right.
But testimony in the Senate report suggests that Israel was able to pursue its own ends in the Iran affair because the White House was so eager to do anything to get the hostages released. Fred Francis, NBC News, the Pentagon.
Israel's defense minister, Yitzhak Rabin, says that more than 2 years ago, the United States asked Israel not to attack the Iranian-backed Hezbollah guerrillas in Lebanon because, according to Rabin, the U.S. feared terrorist reprisals against American hostages. Said Rabin, some places actually have immunity because of the hostages, adding that makes things difficult for us because we did have the tools to fight the Hezbollah. In southern Lebanon, Israel demonstrated today that it also has the tools to fight suspected Palestinian guerrillas. Israeli jets attacking near Sidon, what the military command called terrorist bases. 10 people reportedly were killed or wounded.
Morning is your time. The earth wakes up with you. Always feel that spark of life in everything that you do.
Grape nuts. For you, it's as natural as the morning. No sugar added, no preservatives. Just an honest, nutty crunch. Post Grape Nuts cereal. You know when you have it good.
Yes, you know when you have it good.
What was that?
The boogeyman. From the Black Lagoon.
There's something out there.
Don't worry, as long as the lights are on, we're fine.
What do we do now?
Run for your life!
It's time to change your light bulb. Philips Longer Life Square bulbs last 33% longer than ordinary round bulbs.
Shearson Lehman Brothers, January 1987, where we stand. While the stock market may be near its all-time high, we believe it will go even higher. While interest rates are the lowest in a decade, we believe they will go even lower. Therefore, we believe selective stocks and bonds represent opportunities that cannot be ignored. What do you believe? Talk with us. Shearson Lehman Brothers, minds over money.
NASA today named a 5-man crew for Discovery, the first space shuttle scheduled to fly since the explosion of Challenger a year ago this month. It will be the first time a shuttle crew is made up entirely of astronauts who have flown in space before. And as NBC's Robert Hager reports tonight, the crew will find major changes in the shuttle.
With 85 astronauts waiting and no space flights at least until next year, competition to be aboard that next one has been intense. Today, NASA said the crew will be, as Commander Frederick Houck, veteran of 2 previous space flights, so valuable he's been called to Washington these last few months to help rebuild NASA's image. As co-pilot, Richard Covey. He piloted one flight in 1985. The others are George Pinky Nelson, the astronaut who helped retrieve and repair the disabled Solar Maximum satellite and put it back in orbit. John Lounge, who's logged over 170 hours in space. And David Hilmers, who previously flew on one of the shuttle's super-secret military missions. NASA insisted today that preparations for the next flight are going well. Deputy Administrator Dale Myers.
We're ready to have a safe flight of the shuttle, and that's scheduled for February of 1988. We're on schedule for that flight now.
The next shuttle will not only fly with a redesigned booster joint, NASA said, but with improved main engines, better brakes, and an escape system, permitting astronauts to eject from a crippled shuttle if there were time, pulled out by small rockets. NASA also announced it intends to concentrate more management authority in its Washington headquarters, less at its other centers. Administrator James Fletcher says the reorganized agency will create safer flight.
When you have a tighter organization and you have a clear line of responsibility so that I know what I'm responsible for, and if I make a mistake, the boss is going to blame me, that is also always going to help safety.
But before the next shuttle can fly, there's still a monumental amount of work to be done. Many believe the target date will have to be pushed back. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
A pharmaceutical company said today that one of its drugs, ribavirin, shows promising results in people infected with the AIDS virus. It said this drug prevented them from developing the full AIDS disease. However, many doctors and researchers expressed skepticism, saying that they wanted to see further studies on the drug's effectiveness. On the surface, today's economic news was positive, but many economists were saying the figures don't tell the whole story. For all of 1986, wholesale prices fell 2.5%, the biggest drop in 37 years, but almost entirely the result of oil price declines. Unemployment in this country in 1986 averaged 7%. That's the lowest rate since 1979. The jobless rate in December was just 6.7%, down 0.2% from November. But private economists said that the unemployment figures don't take into account layoffs announced by many companies at the end of the year.
Piedmont Airlines presents a phone number so valuable, you'll never forgive yourself if you don't write it down.
Pen.
This is the number that'll get you airfares so low, you'll find them hard to believe.
Case has got to be a pen, right? Hang on, we'll look.
And you'll also get Piedmont service that's been rated among the best in the industry. So call Piedmont today.
I got it.
What could be simpler?
Put on the Plus.
Now, help prevent dry, chapped lips with new Chapstick Petroleum Jelly Plus. Plus aloe, plus lanolin, plus a special angled tip. New Chapstick Petroleum Jelly Plus.
Put on the Plus.
Robitussin Night Relief not only puts your cold to sleep, it lets you wake up feeling better and ready to go. Night Relief, the nighttime cold medicine from Robitussin.
If you get painful headaches, you should know that recently, people like you nationwide took part in the largest headache test ever. Extra-strength Tylenol against ibuprofen. Conclusion? Not even twice the initial recommended dose of ibuprofen is more effective than extra-strength Tylenol. And something else. Tylenol doesn't irritate your stomach the way ibuprofen can. If nothing is more effective for headaches, and Tylenol is gentler to your stomach, shouldn't your choice be Tylenol?
In Paris, that strike by transit workers now is in its 4th week, and electrical workers also are on strike. The City of Light is going through some dark days. And as NBC's Paul Miller reports tonight, Parisians are running out of patience.
Coffee by candlelight at 8 in the morning.
Power cuts engineered by striking electrical workers forced people to work in the dark or move their business out into the street. This baker used old Christmas tree branches to bake bread. Others took out their frustrations tossing unbaked dough at utility company offices. Some angry consumers marched past the power company offices. Others took them over.
You've just got the ordinary people who live in the area and who are just fed up with these constant strikes.
Parisians have already suffered the indignities of being shoehorned into the few buses and subway trains that are running, of sitting endlessly in traffic, of having to thumb a ride. Many people, like American Alice Furlow, had to rely on fireplaces when their electric heating was cut off.
I'm getting less and less sympathetic with the people who are making us suffer.
Communist-controlled unions called the strikes to push for higher wages. As public anger increased, Prime Minister Jacques Chirac appealed for a return to reason from his temporarily blacked out offices.
We don't want to have a part of France against another one, you know, and this would be bad for everybody.
Right-wing politicians are calling for demonstrations on Monday against the strikes. Chirac may be hoping the demonstrations, plus his government's tough stand, will persuade the strikers to go back to work. Paul Miller, NBC News, Paris.
In South Africa today, there was more violence and more government repression. In downtown Johannesburg, 2 bombs went off in a large store after the building had been evacuated. There were no injuries. The government said the bombs were Soviet-made and blamed the bombings on the African National Congress. The government also gave New York Times correspondent Alan Cowell one day to leave South Africa and barred his replacement from entering. A spokesman said it was a response to what he called the Times' negative attitude. The Times has run many editorials attacking apartheid. In Managua tonight, the Sandinista government proclaimed Nicaragua's new constitution, its first since the revolution in 1979. President Daniel Ortega signed it and showed it off. The Constitution calls for democratic elections and civil rights, including free speech, but officials say it won't really go into effect until the Contras are defeated. Meanwhile, 2,000 political opponents took to the streets to demand reforms now. Among their demands, pardons for all political prisoners now being held without trial. Could the next summit meeting between President Reagan and Soviet leader Gorbachev take place this spring in Geneva? Soviet diplomats were quoted today as saying it could happen there or at some other neutral site. But American officials deny that any plans are being discussed and say that talk of a summit anywhere but in Washington, D.C. is just that, talk.
Tums doesn't have it. Rolaids doesn't have it. Malox Plus does. We have what you need for complete relief of excess acid, heartburn, and gas. Malox for acid and heartburn, plus simethicone for gas. Get complete relief. Try Malox Plus.
Good posture. You don't think about it until you realize you can lose it. Many women may, due in part to a calcium deficiency. That's why there's Posture, a calcium supplement. Without enough calcium, bones can become weak, but Posture taken daily can help them stay strong. And it's specially made not to produce gas. Don't wait. Eat right, exercise, and take Posture now to help assure good posture later. Also available with vitamin D.
AIDS is spreading into the heterosexual community at an alarming rate. No one is safe. How can you protect yourself? Find out Tuesday on the NBC NewsHour.
Minwax makes wood beautiful. Minwax brings out wood's rich, warm glow, so it's as beautiful to look at as it is to touch. Wood finish by Minwax penetrates deep into wood, so it's easy to get outstanding results. And when topped with our own polyurethane, Minwax protects against life's hard knocks and tough spills, letting wood's natural beauty show through. Minwax makes wood beautiful.
Put on the Plus.
Now, help prevent dry, chapped lips with new Chapstick Petroleum Jelly Plus. Plus aloe, plus lanolin, plus a special angled tip. New Chapstick Petroleum Jelly Plus.
Put on the Plus.
I don't do this very often, but the story that you're about to see is so exceptional, so memorable, anything that I say to introduce it will be superfluous. It is the story of a man confronting life, and it comes to us from NBC's Bob Dotson in Australia.
There was a time when Doug Mealing cringed before a mirror.
Are you a monster?
No, my name's Dennis. What's yours?
Cameras would frighten him away.
Have you ever had one of these attacks before?
But today he is performing on the #1 nighttime soap opera in Australia.
Action. It's my dream.
That's all it is, a dream! A dream he has held for 20 years, ever since he tried out for his first role.
I was told, quite politely, I was too ugly.
10:34, shot 2, take 1.
You're a walking nightmare, son! He suffers from neurofibromatosis, the elephant man's disease.
You're out of your tree, mate.
At age 5, one side of his face started growing faster than the other. 60 operations could not correct the deformity. Mealing set aside his acting hopes and took a job that would keep him out of sight.
He works far above the whispers and stares, repairing the old Sydney Harbor Bridge. It is the perfect place for an imperfect face, or so he thought. But he could not climb above his problems.
Got to the point where I nearly committed suicide.
What made you change your mind?
Well, a few years back, I had a proposal from a woman for me to marry her. If she was willing to have me, accept me for what I was, have my children, even though one may end up being deformed or something like that, she was quite willing to do it. Well, I thought if she's willing to do it, there must be something.
The marriage never occurred, but her love did give Mealing the courage to try acting again. This time, he was not turned away.
Would you like to go over the bridge, Sydney Harbour Bridge?
He is passing on that courage to other special children.
Well, up on top of where I work, on top of the bridge, you can see all over Sydney. And all you can see is beautiful blue water. And you can see all the ships coming in.
Yeah.
As the sun comes up off the water,
Yeah.
you have all the water glistening. And it's really beautiful.
Doug Mealing no longer yearns for death.
I like you, Doug.
Ian?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
He has found life. Bob Dotson, NBC News, Sydney, Australia.
That's nightly news for this Friday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press, Senators David Boren and William Cohen, the new chairman and vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. I'll see you again on Monday.